Hello. Hi. Today we are here to talk about a book series, and I don't actually know what this video is supposed to be. I want to say it's like a book review or a book talk, but I think it's just going to be the ramblings of a madman, and it makes sense because the series we're talking about today is The Locked Tomb by Tamsin Muir. I first read this series back in 2021, and I realized recently that I really haven't talked about it on this channel, or anywhere, because the first time that I read it was during 2021, and around that time I kind of like checked out, I dipped, I stopped making book content and reading books, and so it was the kind of thing where like I really enjoyed Gideon the Ninth, the first book, and then the second book threw me for a loop, understandably, and so I didn't really know how I felt about it. I gave it like 3 stars on Goodreads. I was really frustrated by it. I wouldn't say I enjoyed Harrow the Ninth the first time that I read it. And so I was really frustrated, and I didn't really want to talk about it because I was upset by the things that had happened. And so anyway, time passed. Nona the Ninth, the third book, came out. I reread the series before Nona came out. And when Nona came out, I was kind of like, oh, I'm still hopelessly fucking lost and confused, but Nona is a really great character. And there's a lot of information that comes out of Nona that I think really recontextualizes a lot of the series. It opens so many doors for the next book. And so when I read Nona for the first time, I was like, well, I'm confused, but I'm having a good time. And so I kind of reassessed and recommitted, and I let it simmer for a couple years. And now, many years later, 3 years since the first time I read it, almost 4, I reread it again. So the second time I read Nona, the third time I read the first 2. Like I said, the ramblings of a madman. I have now reached a point where like, I wouldn't say I understand the series, because I think you can't understand it all until Alecto comes out. And I also know that I have a lot of questions, and there are a lot of things in Nona specifically that I just like have no idea. But I do feel like I understand the rest of the series pretty well at this point. Like I'm like 70% understanding rate, I think, if I'm on the right track. And I did actually this time around like do a lot of research. I like went on Reddit, and I went and read theory docs, and I went on Tumblr, and so like I got second opinions, and I feel like I'm at a place now where like it's clicking. It's finally clicking, and I feel like I can tell you that this is brain rot central. Like, I am deep in it. It is stuck in my brain. I'm reblogging shit all the time about it. I can't stop thinking about it. And it's just like an all-time series. It's an all-time series. And so on the one hand, I'm here to recommend it to you if you haven't picked it up. But on the other hand, I am here to talk about some insane ramblings, just thoughts, things in my brain. I don't know. It's not going to make a lot of sense. And I'm not really here to like prove anything or do anything. And I don't have it in me to like fully explain the series to you, because if I do, you would die. And so I'm just a girl sitting here telling you about lesbian necromancers in space. That's it. That's all we're doing. So like I said, if you haven't read Gideon the Ninth was kind of marketed in 2019 at BEA as lesbian necromancers in space. And that is in general, that is what is happening. But it's really not a good motto tagline for the whole series. That's just kind of like the basic bare minimum. Yes, there are lesbian necromancers and they are in space. But this series is so crazy. It is so gay and queer in such an interesting way. It delves a little bit into like transness and polyamory and like a lot of weird like QPR kind of stuff, like non-sexual queer relationships, which is my kind of shit. And so it's very weird. And on top of that, it is a puzzle series. So if you don't have any experience, if you haven't been on this channel before, I love puzzle books. Like, we're talking books that are convoluted and confusing and don't make sense, and you have to take notes and you have to study them and you have to ask 6 different people their opinions on it because you don't actually know what's going on. And that, my friends, is the gist of The Locked Tomb. It is a puzzle. Part of the problem here is that the full series isn't out yet, and so the puzzle is not complete, and we can theorize a lot of shit, but like there's a lot that we don't know, and there are a lot of answers we don't have, and so we're kind of just like sitting ducks until book 4 comes out. I have studied a lot, and I understand it now better than I ever have before, and it's more logical than you'd think. So that is part of the draw to it. It's a puzzle. It is a critical thinking kind of series. The first book is not as critical thinking as the rest of them. It is a little bit more straightforward, I'd say. But the second and third books are fucking insane because they kind of make no sense. Which brings us to our next point. This is a series full of unreliable narrators. It is told with an inconsistent structure, a weird narrative. There are flashbacks, there are dream sequences, there are just the most insane plots happening. But it is funny as hell. It is so funny. There's like memes embedded in the text, meme references. If you are a 2010s kid, you will get the meme references probably. It's super funny. It's very lighthearted for such a dark series. It's kind of like being at the end of the world and being like, well, you know, fuck it. We might as well make a joke. That's kind of the draw. I don't really have any like good comp titles, I'd say. It's kind of, I mean, A Chorus of Dragons by Jen Lyons is probably the closest you'll come. I have a whole video about that series if you haven't watched it. But nobody's read that series, so that's really unhelpful. I would say there are some overlap with The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, but they are not really similar. They're just both like funny sci-fi books. I do think there is a little bit of overlap with Piranesi if you've read that, if only because Piranesi is like, it's also a puzzle book and it is more abstract than anything else. And I think The Locked Tomb does a lot of abstraction. And I do want to say, only because of Nona the Ninth, I do think The Hunger Games, specifically Mockingjay, has some sway here. Not a lot, but a little bit. This series is not for everybody. If you're not gay, don't even worry about it. But for some of you, I think you would really, really like it, especially if you like the books that I like, which is probably why you're here. It's just like, it's such a gift. And especially before the fourth book comes out, I think there is something so fun to me personally about reading books before the finale releases, because you have time to do the treasure hunt on your own, to do the scavenger hunt on your own with help from friends, to like figure out if you can predict anything, if you know what's going on. And I know I'm gonna get some of it wrong, but I do like what I've found out so far, and I do feel really confident about going into this next fourth book. So all of that to say, we're going to talk. We're going to chat. I don't know what I have to say in this brain because there's a lot going on in there. But I do highly recommend it. I'm hoping that Alecto the Ninth will be coming out in 2025. But I have a sinking feeling that may or may not come true. So I don't know. We're just hoping for the best. But if you are watching this and Alecto the Ninth has already come out or is coming out soon, sincerely, fuck you. I'm suffering. And I've been suffering since 2022. So jot that down. So like I said, this is essentially just the ramblings of a madman. I don't think I have anything super productive to add to the conversation. And there are so few people who have read Nona the Ninth. Like even my best friends who are big Locked Tomb fans have not read Nona the Ninth, and it's been 2 fucking years. And so I've just been like simmering in my Nona the Ninth bubble for 2 years, trying to like figure out what's happening, trying to be excited about all of it, trying to comprehend literally anything. And so I guess in some ways this is kind of like a Nona the Ninth debrief, because I just finished it earlier today for the second time. But like, I do want to briefly point out, I figured out something life-changing about Harrow the Ninth while I was rereading this third time. I only understood it all on the third read, but I don't know if you guys know this, but the chapter headers are actually very important, because I spent most of this first couple of reads on audio. I didn't pay attention to the chapter headers because I didn't know I was supposed to. And in all of the scenes where Harrow is in the river, in her bubble, in the Canaan House AU with Ortis, all of the fucking skulls are cracked. All of them. They're all cracked to show you that it is like an alternate universe. And I'm so pissed. I'm so mad. I'm so mad. Like I wouldn't have been able to know that was what was happening the first read. But I did read it for the first time on ebook. So like, why was I not paying attention? Nah. I'm just really glad that I understand Harrow the Ninth now. And I have to say, I had no idea that Ortis saved the day in the bubble with Matthias Nonius. I've read that book 3 times now. And the first 2 times I did not register that happened once. I had no idea that even happened. I think I should be in jail. Somebody put me in jail because I don't pay attention to the words on the page. So let's talk about Nona. On certain days, I do think Nona the Ninth might be my favorite because I think it has such a diverse everything. It is just so different from the first 2 in the best way. And I love Nona. I love her so much. I didn't expect to like her that much because she's like generally I go for like the Harrow heart characters, but for whatever reason in this series, like Harrow is one of my least compelling characters. Like I love her and I want the world for her, but also like I love Nona and I love Gideon, but I love Nona. I think Nona is so sweet and there's so many implications there. Like the fact that Alecto, who is the soul of the earth, without her memories, is just like this pure, sweet girl who just wants love and wants to be loved, who loves dogs. Like, it's so poetic. And I think that's the thing that I love about Nona the Ninth as a book, is that like the core theme of this book is love, and it is to be loved. Like, you can't take loved away. That is the gist of it. But then when you expand it open a little bit more and take it more in the context of like Alecto and John and like all of that bullshit, you know, like we're getting into some broader themes of the earth. And I think the recontextualization of John and the apocalypse and the 9 houses in the context of Alecto and like the earth and the planets is so, like, I did not catch that on the first couple of reads of this series, but now that I have it, I'm like, oh my God. The earth was dying and it was screaming, and John turned it into a Barbie and fell in love with the Barbie, but the Barbie is what's keeping him alive. And so he put her in a tomb and silenced her. And then this little girl, worshipped it because her family worshipped it. And she fell in love with the earth. Are we serious? What the fuck? She's never been to Earth. She lived on Pluto for years. And she is in love with the earth. Which takes me to my next point that isn't really a point, but I love John Gaius. I know he's a piece of shit. Like, all my homies hate Jod. We hate that man so much. He is a creep. He is a menace. But like, I just think he's one of the most compelling characters ever written, actually, because he is in some ways very relatable. Like, he's such a compelling villain because he doesn't seem like a villain at first. And I mean, granted, that is kind of how nice guys are perceived, you know. You're like, oh, I'm a nice guy, you can't hate me, I wouldn't do anything bad. And it's like, oh really? Well, you just nuked the entire world, so shut the fuck up. When we meet him at the beginning of the series, it's like, oh my God, you're the emperor, you're God, you are just the man, and we are going to serve you forever, and you're the reason that we have all this power, and so we have to protect you. And like, oh yeah, Blood of Eden bad, ooh, Resurrection Beast bad. And it's like, by the time you get to Nona, the lines have blurred a lot. It's like, are we on the side of Blood of Eden or the cohort? Does it even matter? Who's who? And then you come to find out that John, like, did all the shit that he did, but he did start out trying to save the world and trying to do good things. And it's just like, it's so poignant and relatable to this period in our time, because like, everybody is a villain and everybody is a hero, and we're all stuck in the same time loop over and over where we can't really fix anything, and the trillionaires are winning and leaving the earth, but also like, are we just gonna nuke the whole earth? Like, I don't know. I love John Gaius because of all of this compelling shit in his backstory, but also because I think he's just a really funny guy. Like, he's just some guy, and I want to hit him with my car, but he's literally some guy, and they picked the most basic ass name, John. All my family members are named John. It's fine. But he tells dad jokes, for fuck's sake. He knows memes. There were so many lines in Nona that he just had as one-liners that really were so perfect. Like, I am thinking about the time where he's talking about the internet and Harrow's body. Is it Harrow? Is it Alecto? Could you tell me what you think in the comments? I'm not sure. Whoever is in the dream with him as she, I think it's Harrow, it's like, what's the internet? And he's like, see, I did make a utopia. I loved getting to see the backstory on him and all of his friends who are actually reincarnated and don't know that they were his friends originally, ? I don't know. I'm really compelled to see how all of that plays out in Alecto, because the first time that I read Nona, I was listening on audio, bad Jenna, and it does the thing where it just has the first letter, you know, and you're like, oh my God, like I know those people, but also like that's not their name. And he essentially renamed all of his friends, and they are not aware of it because he didn't want to tell them. It really just adds so much, because you think from the beginning of the series, you are in the now, and now is 10,000 years in the future since the emperor was resurrected, and you don't really know what any of it means, and it's all like kind of metaphoric, but also it's literal, and like God is just a guy, but also God isn't really God. He's kind of a fraud if you think about it, but he's just some guy with a lot of power, and I love that. I just love it. It's like such a brain rot, brain warp, brain worm. I do have to talk about Alecto. Part of what made Nona so confusing the first time is that you're trying to do math and you're trying to figure out whose soul is in Nona's head. And so that's what most of the story is about. It's about souls. And I love books about souls because they're so fucking confusing. And so you're trying to figure out whose soul is in whose body. And it does depend on the eye color sometimes, but not always. And so anyway, at the start of the story, Camilla and Pal, sex pal, our good friend Palamides, are kind of like, okay, we think you could be one of two people. And it's like, yeah, maybe. But it's kind of like there's more options than just two, you know? It seems like it's either Harrow or Gideon, because based on the past, those are the two options we have. However, there comes the next thing, which is, what if it's a completed merger? They have that conversation at one point where they're like, well, what happens if like Harrow ate Gideon officially, and now they're just one person, and the new person is completely different from both of them? But there's a secret fourth thing, which is Alecto, Annabelle Lee, AL. Alecto is just the soul of the earth, but not the entire soul of the earth, because John has most of the soul of the earth, but he put like the overflow into Alecto Barbie. For whatever reason, on this Nona reread, I was actually paying a lot of attention, because so much of this is in the specifics. And there's a lot in the short story too. If you read The Unwanted Guest, it's very important. And The Unwanted Guest is the short story in like a tiny little play where Palamides is inside Nibirius Turn's body with Ianthe's soul. And the two of them are trying to take over his body. And so Palamides said it kind of takes him about a week or so to get control in there. And so he's in there for a while. But Camilla says that it only takes him like 5 seconds in the real world. And so anyway, he and Ianthe are having this riddle game trying to solve, where is Nibirius Turn's body, in which coffin? And it's really a brain teaser. It's really kind of insane, because I know every part of that story is very important, especially in regards to souls and like what could happen in the next book. But the whole time I was just sitting there like, I wish I knew what was happening. I felt like Gideon Nav the whole time, like, can somebody tell me what the fuck is going on? And then at some point, Dulcinea's soul is also there. And she said a couple of things that I highlighted because I think they're going to be important in the next book, but I don't really know how. And I kind of feel like the guy, Charlie from It's Always Sunny, and his Pepe Sylvia board that's like, it's probably important, but I don't really know. And like, it's on the board now, but like, what does it mean? I'm not really sure, but she was there and she said something about dying, I think. And anyway, in conclusion, so much of this book is about souls, and like, I didn't spend the first read through thinking about any soul magic, which was bad for me. But like, there's so many hints throughout Harrow and Nona both that come into play later on. And how the John chapters interact with Nona was interesting, because John would be like, oh, like I learned how to like puppet this like this government leader who was dead from afar, which, by the way, do we think that's the United States? Maybe. And so anyway, he talked about that at one point earlier in Nona, and then by the middle/end we get Ianthe puppeting Nibirius Turn, which I thought was really, really smart, just to like show us, and then to do it, and like, I don't know, again, ramblings of a madman, it's fine. Ianthe is also a character that we could talk a lot about, because she is just an insane lesbian. She's just an insane lesbian. And some days I hate her, and some days I like her, and I don't really know how I'm supposed to feel about her. What was I talking about? Soul magic. We're talking about soul magic. So much of this book relies on soul magic, because it's about like swapping and going into the river, and like there's the Palamides Cam problem, there's the Nona problem, there's the Gideon problem. Curiona. And that's not even probably all of them. Like, there's a bunch of stuff happening too with like Judith, who I believe is possessed by a resurrection beast briefly, but also Nona can talk to the resurrection beast, aka Alecto can talk to the resurrection beast, which would make sense because the resurrection beasts are essentially the souls of the planets. And so she's talking to the planets because she's a planet. I really do want to know what goes on with Tamsin and her editors, because I feel like if I were her editors, I would be like, Tam, I'm so sorry. I'm so stupid. Please tell me what you mean here. And I like that the souls depend on the eyes. Like, the eyes give you so much information. I don't know. There's just like, there's so much information in this book and in the previous book that I know will come into play in the next book, but we don't even know where the next book is going. Because like, at least at the end of Harrow, it was like, all right, there's a cliffhanger. We don't know what happens to Harrow. She ends up obviously in the locked tomb, but at the time it was kind of like, I don't know where she is. And then she wakes up, her body wakes up on a different planet. And so the first time I read it, I was like, okay, is her soul even in there? Like, is she dead? What's happening? But there are a lot of context clues that are actually hidden in the text about the river. I've been reading a lot about the river, and I don't know. There's like a lot of theories that I have that could be right or they could be wrong. Another one that I want to talk about. If anybody knows what's going on with the messenger, I did not understand. I still don't understand it, actually. It does remind me a lot of the historian people in Mad Max. So if you've seen the Mad Max, I think it's in Fury Road and Furiosa, but especially in Furiosa, they usually pick a person who has like human history inside of them so that they can like pass on what's happened to the future generations. And I do, on the one hand, I wonder if the messenger is something like that, where it's like the message is just like, here's our history. Or is the message like, oh, like John Gaius like destroyed the world? Or a secret third option that is something unrelated to that? Or is it something like love, the answer is love, you know, or like some stupid like Evanescence song? I could see Tamsin Muir putting like a fucking Call Me Maybe song as the message. But I'm so compelled by the character because we don't know who they are, but they are implied to be a they. There are multiple times where they try and call the angel she, and they get corrected because the angel is like, no, we, they. And so it's like, are there multiple souls within the angel? Did the angel eat a bunch of souls? Is it an amalgamation of souls? Like, who is this angel person? Why are they protected by Blood of Eden and Pash? And the thing that I caught on this read that I think is so, it makes me want to roll my eyes and laugh my ass off, is the fact that it's the messenger called AIM, and their predecessor is Emma Sen. So I just sit with that. When I figured that out, I was like, you've got to be shitting me. And that's what I love about this series, because it's set in the future, and yet John Gaius's fingerprints of being like a Tumblrina are just all over this stupid fucking series. Like, Nun House left grief. Like, shut the fuck up, man. I love you, but shut up. I saw a post the other day that was like, think about it, you know, like John Gaius was like here in our time doing what he does, and so he could be reblogging your post right now. We are running out of time here, folks. I really should have more things to say. I have a lot of theories. I should probably like concise. I probably should like have a better idea of what I want to talk about before I make a video again. But like, there's just so much in the locked tomb, and I could make a whole video about like the pall of it all, because that's fucking insane, and I don't know the implications of what that's gonna mean in the next books, because they're kind of like the perfect lictorhood, but like, what does that mean? What does that even look like? I don't know. Can Harrow and Gideon become that, or do they even want to become that? Does Gideon still hate Harrow? How does Harrow feel? Harrow's been in a box for 6 months. Like, what is she doing? I don't know. And also the end of Nona, Alecto literally just stabs John and he wakes up. What does that even mean? I have questions. I have a lot of questions, actually. And number one, first of all, Tamsin Muir, how dare you? Second of all, when the fuck is Nona the Ninth coming out? I would like to know. Inquiring minds would like to know. Yeah, if you would be interested in seeing me explain the locked tomb, I don't know that I'd be particularly good at it, but I do have a summary of the whole series, so I don't know. Maybe it's something I should consider doing. Let me know if you'd be interested, or if you need that kind of content. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go think about everything all the time. Thanks. Bye.